Welcome to That's Pretty Neat with Rodger and Stefan, where we discuss neat, holistic, regenerative agriculture.
We have lots of different things growing on our ranch, and they have lots of different names. We have forbs, brassicas, legumes. What you looking at? Cute cat. Somebody wants to say hi.
Yeah, she wants
Hi.
to say hi.
Hi, 13. So we have forbs, legumes, brassicas, weeds, herbs, grasses. I'm sure there's more.
Yep. So
what is the difference between all of these and why are they all important?
So I think let's start by having the camera look at that little calf who's rubbing its neck on that oak in the middle of a big bunch of thistle. Is that bull thistle?
I think so.
And we've just been watching it graze the thistle quite happily.
There she goes.
Yep, there's another bite of thistle. So when we look at things holistically, I don't believe that there's anything called a weed. A weed is just a plant that's in the wrong location. We've only got one planet. Everything's endemic to this planet. And based on succession and Gondwana land having been one continent and then splitting up, everything's everywhere. And then on top of that, you've got birds flying things around. So, it's what is the time frame? It's native, it's non-native, poppycock. It's just academic nonsense. We've got one functioning whole ecosystem. Now, people are often worried about poisonous plants. And I like to remind you that most people eat onions every single day of their lives. But onions are deadly poisonous.
I don't like the taste.
You don't like, you're probably wise because they're poisonous. However, it always comes down to what is the dose. So from that point of view, if we plan for and manage for absolute biodiversity, then the percent in any pasture of a quote unquote linear decision-making test that something's poisonous is minuscule. So that is what's more important to know, that there is no such thing as a weed. It's all biodiversity. Poisonous plants are only poisonous if you have too much of them. Then what's the difference between a grass, a forb, and all the rest? So grasses belong to one of the largest families. I think there are over 10,000 species of grass. Most of the healthiest grasslands in the world have about 140 species. So, for example, the Serengeti in Africa has the highland part of the migration and then the lowland part of the migration. And fascinatingly enough, both the highland and the lowland both have 140 species of grass, but they're totally different grasses.
Wow.
And then the combined, the highland and the lowland have over 1,000 species of legumes.
Wow. That's
So we as humans have been managing linearly to simplify and kill and burn and bash and kill for millions of years. And we've simplified things down to where we now think that cows want a grassland. They don't. They want biodiversity. They need biodiversity.
As we can see.
As we can see. And the grasses are a nice bunch grass, but grasses within a pasture should really only be about 30% of the pasture. And they're needed because their leaves are full of lignin, and lignin pulls the forage through the gut of the thing. But more importantly, the lignin is the ultraviolet light protector for the soil when it's laying flat on the ground. As far as the protein, the major source of protein is all your legumes. As far as the carbohydrates, well, that's mostly the broadleaves.
Okay.
Now have a look at the broadness of the leaf on that thistle. That's a broadleaf.
That does look like a very broad leaf.
Yeah, so that's full of carbohydrate. Hence the calf is standing there having a lovely munch. Now, interestingly enough, most of the broadleaves today, the only place we find them is in our vegetable gardens. And if you think that, man evolved on the prairies and everything like that, and our food source was livestock, we turned biodiverse grasslands, we killed them, but we kept the species protected from the cows in our vegetable gardens as we invented agriculture.
Yeah.
So we selected these species out of grasslands. And so now the key is, how do we now re-get this biodiversity? How do we get our grasslands looking like vegetable gardens again, full of broadleaves, full of legumes, and then full of grasses? And I think you're doing quite a good job here. What else? Forbs, taprooted forbs, the thistle is a forb.
Thistle's a forb.
Your chamisa bush is a forb.
Which one's that?
Your coyote bush. Those are forbs. So generally anything with a taproot is a forb. Then you get broadleaves and grasses and legumes, and those are the general categories. But key is biodiversity. We want as much biodiversity as possible. And you've got a lettuce growing in here, you've got grass growing in here, you've got thistles, you've got perennial grasses, annual grasses. There's so much biodiversity. Well, the more biodiversity the microorganisms in the cow's intestine have to consume, the more healthy they're going to be, the more nutrients they get, etc., etc. But the more there is, the chances of the poisonous one killing them are slim to none.
Yeah.
Because it just passes through as a tiny fraction of what they're eating. Cool. There are some exceptions to the rule. There's some plants that if they're that big, if they take a single bite of it, they take 2 steps and fall over dead. But the period of the year that they're that big is maybe 2 days a year. And the chances of having your herd down by the river when those plants are that high.
Good thing we don't have a river.
Slim to none. Good thing you don't have a river. But ranchers that do have a river and have those plants, they just put that into their planning
Grazing
procedure.
plan,
They just put it into the grazing plan. Yeah. So you plan around it. Yeah.
Cool. It's pretty neat.
It is
I
pretty
got
neat.
it this time.
You got it. You beat me to the punchline.
You can follow Rodger at d2gftf.com and also on his socials at Rodger Savory Holistic Management on YouTube and Facebook. We are Las Cumbres Ranch. You can follow us on social media at Las Cumbres Ranch over all platforms. And thanks for tuning in. It's been real neat.